we're going to talk about carving. Again, as I said before, the carving can simply be a border, as what you're seeing right there, or you can be an entire stock of nothing but carving. The carving is only limited as your imagination. It can be thorns, just simply scrolly lines, flowers, animals, weasels, snakes, anything you can think of. If you can draw it, it can be carved in. Here's a little key. If it's for instance, an animal, if you can't draw an animal, a deer, for instance, that looks like a deer, it doesn't look like a pig with antlers, then don't try carving it. It's not going to get any better. But what you can do is find a nice picture of one, a line drawing picture, get it enlarged or reduced to the right size, tape it on there. And then again, this is where your little ponce wheel comes in. Very handy tool. If you have a tracing taped to a stock, you want to do the outline. This ponce wheel, it's like a little spur here, and you just put it on that line that's taped to the wood and roll along it, and it'll make very tiny, very close little indentations in the wood. Once you remove the paper, you'll see a clear outline of tiny dents, which are surprisingly easy to follow with a veining tool. I don't know why, because they're just dents and they're separated by wood, but you have a nice sharp veining tool, it really wants to follow that pretty carefully. And you have to be very careful anyway, but you follow it out and you've got your outline, you've carved it out. Then the trick is, if you're doing, there's incised carving, which at this stage, that's what you would call some of these flowers and leaves. It's simply just the outline carved. The surface itself is left totally flat. That's an incised carving. Relief carving is where you reduce the background and you actually carve curves and textures and depth to the things. The leaves are dished out, the center of the flowers is dished in. So this is relief carving. And there's shallow relief carving, and you can do it heavier as you like, you know. But almost in no case do you ever need to go more than 1/16 of an inch deep for even the most heavy carving. That would be about the limit that would ever be necessary. A lot of times much less than that. But it's all comprises of drawing out the pattern, either tracing it from an existing picture, or in this case, all these flowers and lines are just free-handed in. I just drew it with my grease pencil. If I didn't like it, I wet it and erased the line and try it again till it looks right to me. Once it's done, I'll trace it out. The main lines, the long lines, I'll do with a rolling blade like I did before. The rest of them, usually I just start with a veining chisel. Like for the leaves, and they're all each drawn in first about where I think they should be in their size and angle. But it's just carve the outlines. And here you can carve, get a little aggressive, get a little deep on all those, and carve the outlines of everything. A little trick for the leaves here is, again, that bordering tool I showed where it has a curved border. Once I have one line carved in, you can simply put that on a 20-inch spacer, works just right. That's what these are. And you put it in there and you make a parallel curving line to it. And once you remove the background, now here's the way it comes out first, but I already carved the whole groove in. Then I remove the background on this side. Over here, I'm removing it on both sides. And when it's done, you have this raised vine of a 20th of an inch. And again, you can kind of go back and forth. This will have to be touched up. I'll probably go over a couple passes with that bordering tool to curve the surface if possible. But you basically relieve the background, relief carving. You cut away all the background to as uniform a depth as you can. Then you go into carving the leaves themselves. One of the tricks here, and is here you see where I start. First I cut a V groove right down the center of the leaf. Then I use a shallow gouge, which is just a shallow dip chisel, or gouge rather, curved chisel. And using the corner of it, and I could demonstrate that pretty readily if I can get one here. Here we have a leaf. It's got the center vein just cut down by eyeball. down to the center. But we use the corner of it right up against that vein, and that's what I'm following, the center vein. But I let the right side of this chisel drop a little as the leaf gets wider. Of course, it's a little more resistance, then I'm cutting a little more wood. But also, all keeping that left edge of the chisel against the vein. And I have half a leaf cut out. And then I do the other side. Oops, I'm going against the grain right here. Good example of that. You see, you want to catch and pull up. So all you do is reverse the direction of the wood, and this should come out a lot easier. You can see already the wood cuts much smoother going this direction. The leapers. And we'll clean this one up a little bit. Okay, there we have it. We have a little bit of a raised rib in the middle, the vein of the leaf. A couple ways you could finish that up. One of the really handy ones, this is about ready to replace this little sanding belt stick.
And what's this tool called? Sanding belt stick?
I think so, yeah. But I got a little bit of a ridge here or there. I can smooth it out. I'm just sanding out that leaf, get the kind of smooth bottom to it.
It's actually pretty slick.
And there we have a leaf. Now I can
add further detail if you wanted. Extra veins in the leaf.
The veins a little too tall, or I can sand that down a little bit. You do quite a lot with that. Now, in lieu of this is where all this assortment of little files, riffling files, these are called. I don't know what riffling means, but they do work great. They come in a variety. For this service, you would want round ones, but you'd want a bent one, and I've got every shape under the sun here. Now, with the flat one, here we get a round bent riffling file. I can kind of do the same thing with this on these leaves. We can just get in here and clean up an existing leaf. Now, of course, it's a little more aggressive than sandpaper. The teeth are a little bigger. That wasn't a good example there, I guess. Right here, this one needs to be cleaned out. And I can use the heavier part of the file here, because that's a whiter part of the leaf. And I got rid of that little burr. Here's some rough spots on here. Now in the close-ups you can see the pores, the grains, the cracks like in the leaf and the wood. This is again what that sand film was all about in the general finish. Once the entire carving is done, a lot of people say leave it alone, it's good. And if you've got a really nice tight grain piece of wood, that's probably fine. But what I like to do is I brush in oil, spread some out with the toothbrush and spread it very thin and evenly. And then places that are, especially like leaves that have show great pores like this, then I'm sand filling it with this, just very gently. I'll sand it once there's a little trace of oil on it. And then by just rubbing like that, all of a sudden you fill those pores with that sawdust of sand and oil, and then they become a nice, smooth, carved images. And again, this is the flexibility of your imagination. When cutting these flowers, I take a grooved chisel, something like this, and I simply take a guess about what size I want them flowers, and I press in an outline, a rough outline. Then I take my veiny chisel and carve it out to deepen it. Then I take a smaller chisel and the same thing, I carve a little circle around the middle for the center. And then I smooth it with my sanding stick. Just sand a little center seed nub or whatever it is. Get it nice and smooth. And then I take a little very tight U-gouge chisel. And it's no, it's real narrow. That'd be it, bub. Find this real handy. For one thing, when I'm doing borders and I cut in the outline, once I've got just a groove of an outline, I'll use this tight little U-gouge and just go right along the edge to take the wood away, to give me a little elbow room for working with the bigger chisels. Like here's an example. I can do one right between these leaves. I just get in there and take the wood away from the vein. There, I've exposed the vine here. There, you can see that, okay?
Now you don't have to worry about overrunning that vine.
Right, now when I get in with a wider chisel to take out the bulk of that wood, I don't have to be so careful to get so close to this nice little vine I've patiently put in. But this also is used then in shaping the flower. Once I got this pressed in, the small circle around it, and then I use this to gradually just deepen this hole. I want the contours of the flower itself. Now, with this camera right in my way, it's a little harder for me to get around this. But it's enough to illustrate what I'm getting at. Okay, just deepen that down to wherever I think it looks right. Then what I'll do is take a veiny chisel and cut the segments of the leaf, the lines going across at the petals, separate the petals, and just at random I made these pretty much 5 petal flowers. Once that's accomplished, use any kind of you have a smaller one than this. But see if I should have one right here's an example. The petals are segmented, but the corners are not rounded off yet. So with the corner of the chisel, you just go in and round off these corners.
Then remove that and they're smooth, huh?
And then we'll just show how that's done. Now, some of this stuff, I mentioned a couple of other little auxiliary tools that you find, like this little, it's a clay tool. And this is just works neat for getting in here and these little nooks and crannies and scratching or prying out tiny little bits of wood that don't belong. And you can see right here I'm going to use it sideways as a scraper a little bit, or I put the point down and get right up to the edge of something, make a cleaner edge. And works good for just really belling up to the edge of a leaf, for instance. When all these little fine carvings, it's hard to get them really clean and neat. So once I've got that kind of cut out, as I was illustrating over here, again I use my little belt sander and get on and then just smooth it out. I'm smoothing out the flower and the edges of it. And you don't have to be so very careful. Nice thing about this kind of stuff, carving foliage or something, is that it's nature. That you make one kind of flower, but it comes in about 9,000 variations of size and shape and angle. So it's hard to make one that looks too incorrect. There's just some rough parameters it has to be to look like that kind of a flower. Then I say, once you've carved all the surfaces you want, whichever way you want, to whatever degree, your leaves, your flowers, whatever the vine, and of course you move the background first, carve those out. Then again, it's simply a matter of brushing in 2 coats of oil over everything. And after that first coat, like I say, with the carving, I'll go over with that little sander and very lightly sand all those porous spots and let that sawdust fill in the gaps. And let that dry good, and then put 1 more coat of oil on, brush it in well, and you're pretty well done. After that's totally dry, the background. Now, in most cases, most carvers are going to stipple it. So a stippling tool you can use pretty much anything. It's just a random series of dents in the wood. And they can be concave, like little beads, or little divots like the surface of a golf ball, in any varying size. One thing you watch out for is you don't need to go very deep, and you don't want a pattern to it. You don't want them all in neat rows. They should look very randomly. And that should only be applied after the finish is done. If you got as high gloss as you're going to get, and then you just press them in. Here's a couple of examples of other alternative background finishes that I did just on some basswood. Now, basswood is the premier fancy carving wood that most people, wood carvers, would know about. This is simply a smooth background. You get it as smooth as you can, you sand it down. As you can see, it's next to impossible to get it perfect. It's going to be a little wavy, but some people think that looks fine enough. This is a gouged background. You deliberately don't worry about those chisel marks. In fact, you just leave them there. It shows that it's hand carved, and there's nothing wrong with that. This is the traditional stippling. Now, in this soft wood, you'll see some of them starting to end up look like lines. That's just because the wood is too soft for some of that effective stippling. In the other areas, it doesn't show up good because it's harder. This wood varies. I don't know why basswood is so popular as carving. It's so soft. There's another variation yet that is sometimes used. And this is the series, as you can see, of horizontal lines. And this is done with a veining tool, freehand. And the secret here is you do not want them exactly parallel, but you take it and just by eyeball try to get them as evenly spaced and as parallel as you can get it. And it's not going to be perfect, and that gives it the charm. If it was perfect, then it's just the geometric thing, like some more checkering in the background. You might as well just checker it. So, it's the first time I really ever tried that, and I actually kind of like the look of that. Well, like I said, they all look nice, depending on what you like.
So that would be your background filler in your carving job.
Mm-hmm. There's 4 choices you can do with the background. And actually, that stippling one can be, this is simply little tiny pointy dots pressed in, but they can be, like I say, using a concave little punch and pressing them in like a beaded surface, which would look, I think, quite a little different yet. I haven't done that yet, but I have seen it. It looks pretty nice. So that's a preliminary, really, on wood carving. There's so much more to do, but with carving or checkering, the real #1 secret to it is simply get your hands in there and do it. You'll never really know what I'm talking about until you try your hand at it. And 90% of it cannot really be taught, but simply learned by doing, by trial and error.
Muscle memory.
Muscle memory, getting to know the tool, and you discover your own little secrets and tricks to how to use those tools effectively. And you develop your own train of taste in the types of things you like, or the types of things you like to do. Sometimes they're two different things, but it's very rewarding, just personally very satisfying that, hey, I did that, you know. And even if nobody else likes it, you know, if you could be proud of the work and the time you spent at it, quite a sense of accomplishment. And then if you got friends or customers that are pleased with your work, that's very satisfying.